Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are now live. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I would like to call this meeting to order. Prior to commencing our regular business this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the members of our Climate Action Committee. Councilor Coburn, as the chair of this committee, would you please go around the virtual table and introduce the members to council, please? Councilor Coburn, go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to announce, along with Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton and I on this committee, are 5 outstanding community members. The vice chair is Schneider, Bob Gray, Danuta Vello, Luke Van Vliet, and John Anderson.
Thank you, Councilor Coburn, committee members. I look forward to our partnership as we work together environmentally sustainability. Approval of the agenda. That the agenda be approved as presented. Someone who moved to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Barfoot, second by Deputy Mayor Carlson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, can we just use a show of hands, or do you want to take the vote?
A show of hands is fine.
All in favor? It is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. You can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. We're now down to presentations. Climate Action Plan. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Menes, our CAO. Meneses, go ahead, Al.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is going to be a joint effort presentation. Both Brittany and I will take the lead on the slides as we're going through it. And really the intent today of the presentation is just to provide a little bit of background, set a little bit of the stage for what we hope will be some robust discussions. And it gives really council an opportunity to ask members of the Climate Action Committee some questions and really get an understanding in terms of where council wants to be, some of the pointed questions you might have in regards to where you want to go, and hopefully we can have some good dialogue in establishing a framework in terms of where Georgian Bluffs is going to be on the climate action file. On the next slide, you might ask, why do we have to plan? Why should we be planning? And what we've put together here is a couple of points just for council's consideration. I mean, I think we need to establish a baseline and a forecast of our greenhouse gas emissions and potential climate impacts. I mean, if you're going to start anywhere, you need to start with a baseline. And part of what that means is really understanding where you are right now as a township, where we are as an organization in terms of our emissions, both from a facilities perspective, a fleet perspective, some of the other things that we can comprehensively measure. And really then it gives us a baseline so that we can measure ourselves in the years moving forward and really be able to identify for council and for our residents the successes that we've had to date, or where we need to put a little more pressure on ourselves to move the needle a little bit further and a little bit faster than what we've wanted to do. In terms of a response, it's really to outline a comprehensive strategy in order how we're going to respond to climate change locally. And I think a lot of people might ask, what are we going to do locally? And part of that is really, we need to do our part. I think if everyone took the position that, what can we do in our little town, in our little municipality, we'll let some of the big players do it and they'll have an effect. If everyone sort of had that approach, then nothing would get done. And I think it's important that we all, in all municipalities across the world, that they all take a leading hand in driving the climate folder forward and making a sizable difference in their specific communities. And yes, collectively, we will have a change on climate action, and it's the only way to do it is if everyone takes some direct responsibility for what they can control. In terms of grants, I think this is the way you sort of move forward. I've always said that what we move forward with is in a fiscally responsible manner, and part of that is really mining for all available grants. So you're going to see some numbers in the presentation that's going to come forward. It might startle some, but the reality is That's a budget number. We're not expecting that the taxpayers are going to pay for 100% of those identified forecasted costs. What we're saying is that we believe this is a good start in terms of a budget, but what we're going to do is really mine for every available grant that's out there to help offset costs. And we've got some other strategies in terms of being fiscally responsible, and we'll get to that on some later slides. In terms of goals, I'm a firm believer that you achieve what you measure, and if you don't plan to succeed, you simply won't succeed. And so really part of the climate action plan is to establish some goals and some targets for us to mitigate some of the risks associated with climate change and identify some greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies. Once again, it's starting with the baseline, and depending on where we go with it, maybe it's a target that we're going to reduce our emissions by 10% a year for the next 10 years. Maybe it's 20% a year for the next 5 years. I don't know what that's going to be. That's part of the strategy and sort of part of the plan that we're going to define as we move forward. But I think it's important that we establish those goals. It's no different in our personal lives, or, you know, if you want to achieve something, you achieve what you measure. And if you strive, you put yourself some achievable, some stretch goals for yourself, and you work and you remind yourself on a regular basis of the goals that you've set for yourself. You're going to work hard to achieve those goals, and it's no different with climate action and for the township. And in terms of the impact, I mean, it's something that is a little difficult to sort of get your head around, but really the reality is the cost of doing nothing is going to far outweigh the cost of doing something and really being proactive in what we want to do. If everyone plays a role, the situation will improve, and we need to lead the way. Not only do we need to lead the way as a township, we need to lead the way within our county, and we need to lead the way so that our residents and our ratepayers can see that we're taking it seriously. I mean, everyone is in Georgian Bluffs. They love the outdoors. They love the landscape. They love the climate that's out here, whether you're winter or summer. And the reality is, it's our collective responsibility to do what we can to preserve the beautiful landscape that we've got out there and preserve our environment. And the next slide, Brittany.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Thank you, Mr. CAO. So in considering the climate action planning process, Council has already taken an important first step, being establishment of the Climate Action Committee. The Climate Action Committee was established by Bylaw 2020-097 by Council at their meeting on October 7th, 2020. The Climate Action Committee held its first meeting on November 13th, 2020, and is composed of 2 members of Council, being Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton and Councillor Kathy Mark-Coburn, and 5 community members, all of which are in attendance this afternoon. Said bylaw, which established the committee, also established a terms of reference, which identified a mandate for the committee, which includes to help develop recommendations which will result in the development of a climate action plan, including potential actions by municipal staff and the public, community engagement mechanisms, public education and outreach, policy direction, and strategic priorities, to investigate how other municipalities are addressing the climate crisis, and to seek opportunities for regional collaboration on climate change planning, including but not limited to the County of Grey, Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, Grey Bruce Health Unit, and to ensure alignment with the same. To ensure we are effectively meeting the mandate and ensure success in creation of the Climate Action Plan, we propose the following: that Council establish climate action as a priority, that $150,000 be included in annual budgeting processes over the next 3 years, with $50,000 of that dedicated to 2021, and that a consultant be hired to assist in creation of the plan and help steer climate efforts. All throughout this process, staff are dedicated to exploring and mining for available grants, including those available from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Municipal Energy Plan Program, which is available to municipalities to assist in the climate action planning process with available funding of up to $90,000 for creation of the plan and $25,000 for its implementation and maintenance. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our CAO to discuss collaboration.
Thank you, Brittany. Collaboration, I think we'll all agree is extremely important. I mean, Township of Georgian Bluffs going on their own, as I said to you, part of our responsibility is to be fiscally responsible. Yes, we want to move the file forward and really take a leading role in the environment and climate action, but we also know that we've got budgetary priorities, and council will see this next week when the preliminary budget is introduced to council, some of the enormous pressures that council has. So we want to take an approach that's fiscally responsible, and we believe part of that responsibility includes a lot of collaboration. So to that extent, I've already had some discussions with some of the neighboring CAOs, including the county CAO, and I'm happy to report that there's a real strong desire for all of the municipalities, the townships, to get together and look for opportunities for cost sharing to move it forward. We all recognize that there has to be sort of a plan and a sub-plan where we'll have sort of that overall arching plan, but Georgian Bluffs will have to have their own plan to support the overall goals of the county and the overall goals of the region. But we know that there's a real opportunity and a real desire to have some cost sharing. So an example of that would be the following. So if some of the municipalities who are in the same position that Georgian Bluffs is in right now, and they're looking to hire a consultant to start that baselining modeling so that we can move the organization forward and set some goals in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and getting to carbon neutrality, is there an opportunity where we can cost share and get a consultant on board that instead of just working specifically for Georgian Bluffs, it can be a consultant that will draft a draft baseline for us, a baseline for some of the other neighboring municipalities, and we share those costs. So instead of the municipality or the township perhaps spending $20,000 to get that done, maybe there's an opportunity where it'll only cost us 10 or 7 because those costs are going to be spread over a lot larger geographical population, and there's going to be some synergies to be had. So the good news is that the CAOs that I've spoken to, not one has expressed any concerns, not one of them has said that they want to go in a different direction. All of them have been open to communication. All of them want to get together and discuss an approach where we can collaboratively share on some of these costs and move the entire file forward, while understanding that it's important to have sort of a made in Georgian Bluffs or a made in name the municipality or township approach as well to support the overall plan. But the good news is there's a strong desire for collaboration.
Thank you, Al. So in circling back to our plan, staff have created a very high-level 3-step process for council's consideration this evening in preparing for the climate action planning process. So first is step 1, being creation of an RFP for onboarding of the consultant to assist in our creation of the climate action plan. Said RFP will be created and advertised and presented to council for their approval. And as we have discussed previously, staff continue to be dedicated to mining for grants that can help ease the financial impact of the climate action planning process. Following awarding of the RFP, staff, committee members, and community stakeholders will work with the onboarded consultant to move through the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities BARC framework and the Partners for Climate Protection Program framework as well. So here I would draw your attention to page 4 of 8 of report CAO 2021-01 as appended to your agenda. Specifically the first chart, which I will refer to as figure 1, which compares the Partners for Climate Protection and Building Adaptive Resilient Communities to each other, including membership fees, framework information, benefits, and other users that are currently enrolled in both programs. So as you can see in that chart, PCP comes at no charge, whereas BARC comes in at a $20,000 one-time fee, which we are proposing to fund from our $50,000 allotment in 2021. PCP is mitigation focused and includes 5 milestones, whereas BARC is adaptation focused and also includes 5 milestones. In turning the page in the same report, you're now looking at page 5 of 8 of the same report. I'll now draw your attention to what I will call figure 2, which is an additional chart which further outlines PCP and BARC and the various milestones throughout each framework and the goals we have already established throughout each milestone. So building adaptive and resilient communities, which is our adaptation portion. You'll see the goals that we've already established in this chart, which commence with initiate, moves to research, planning, implementation, and monitoring the plan following its establishment. Simultaneously, we will be moving through Partners for Climate Protection, PCP frameworks, which again are 5 milestones, and start with creating a greenhouse gas emission inventory and forecast, setting an emissions reduction target, developing a local action plan, and implementation of the plan, and monitoring the plan's progress. And as I mentioned, both of these frameworks will be moved through simultaneously and will be led by the onboarded consultant in consultation with the committee and staff. And again, we recognize this is very high level, but step 3 will be develop, implement, and monitor the plan following conclusion of both the PCP and BARC frameworks. Council will be consulted along the way and will have the opportunity to review the plan upon its development. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our CAO.
Thank you very much, Brittany. So from this slide, you can see that it's going to take some money. I mean, if we want to be serious on the climate action file, it has to be more than just words. You have to put some money behind it. Does it all have to be taxpayer money? No, as I said to you, we're going to look for everything we can, but we have to put some money behind it. Part of what we're proposing, and this is all based on estimates and based on benchmarking what other similar sized municipalities and others that are ahead of us on the climate action file. This is a modest proposal. It certainly isn't the Cadillac or the Rolls Royce of proposals, but it certainly, I believe, will get us moving in the right direction and will start to give us a real sizable difference in where we are today, where we're going to be in a couple of years from now. So the first one, as Brittany said, is really $50,000 is being requested for council next week as part of the budget deliberation and the initial draft of the budget for council's consideration. Out of that, $20,000 will go for the membership, and then the balance will really be used to bring on a consultant to help develop that plan. Part of what we've said is to do this any justice, we've estimated that it's likely going to cost us about $150,000 over the first 3 years. Once again, that's the overall budget. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be funded 100% from our taxpayers. On the next slide. So really and this is something that we sort of hum and hawed from a staff perspective and with some consultants that we've got on board that are looking at our organizational review. And part of what we said was, right now, climate action, we don't have any dedicated resources that are really, from a staffing perspective, working on this. Really, Brittany's been filling the void and doing a great job, but the reality is, it's on the side of her desk. You really need some dedicated resources if you're going to move this forward. And part of what we will likely be proposing as part of the initial draft budget is to look at a contract resource that will come in and really define exactly what that means. Now, what would that person be doing besides what's in the bullets in front of you? Really, they'll be looking at setting up that roadmap for us with the consultant, really setting up measurable goals for us. A strong proponent is what I believe is really a dashboard system where if we're going to do this any justice, we're going to actually put a dashboard on our website so that anyone who's interested in climate action can look on our website and have some links there and see the dashboard in terms of what we're doing on the climate action file, some of the successes we've had to date, what our work plan is, some of the things that we're doing in the given year, and really provide that transparency and visibility to our ratepayers. Part of what this person will do as well is set up a 5-year and a 10-year capital forecast in regards to what we're going to be doing from a capital improvement perspective. So if it's low-hanging fruit, like moving some of our community centers into more cost-efficient lighting, in regards to solar panels, regards to building envelope, and really doing some of those things, really providing the analysis that's going to be required so that when the business case comes forward for council in the future years, in terms of proposing some money to be spent on climate action, the business case will be solid and council can look at that and really understand why we're asking what we're doing and understanding why we're moving it forward. And to me, the biggest part is really the research. When you don't have a dedicated resource to it, you're not doing the research, you're not taking the courses that you need to take, you're not really looking at that benchmarking and providing council with the analysis that's required. I'm really envisioning here something where the resource will be working with the committee, really identifying a work plan, really moving the file forward, providing regular updates to the committee on a monthly basis, and then those reports will be all coming to council so that council can really understand the work that's being proposed and how it's moving forward. On the next slide, really we talk about return on investment. And for those of you who have heard me say this, sort of the return on investment, when you're talking about climate action, when you're talking about municipality, when you're talking about setting sort of the example for your ratepayers and really building a community that you want to be proud to call home, return on investment isn't simply the financial. You know, you're not investing $20,000 on climate action and expecting to get a $30,000 return. What you're really doing is community building. What you're really doing is building the brand that your ratepayers will know, that anyone who knows Georgian Bluffs will know that we're leaders on the climate file, that, you know, it's about preserving the natural environment that is Georgian Bluffs now, preserving the shorelines that we have, the beautiful vistas that we have, and making sure that you know, the reason why people are up here, the reason why people are in the area is because of the natural beauty. They love to enjoy the outdoors 4 seasons out of the year. And part of what we need to do is our little part to preserve the beautiful landscape that we have now. And so that's when I talk about return on investment. I don't want to give anyone any illusions that there's going to be sort of, you know, the traditional financial return on that investment. What we're talking about is really creating a community that everyone's going to be proud of, that someone can look at that and say, you know, we've played our little part in making the world a better place, and in return, making our little part of the world even a better place. On the next slide, really just going to be wrapping up here. So what we're hoping is that, you know, council establishes climate action as a priority. I think you've done that already as part of your strategic plan. You've talked about climate action in a whole bunch of files. I think ultimately a lot of the things that we talk about have a climate tinge to them, and I think it has to be a lens that's approached to everything that we're doing. It's a lens that's brought on to not only from a procurement perspective, from a facility management perspective, from our fleets with all of our various trucks and vehicles that we have, to everything that we're doing in terms of the materials that we use on our roads. Every little thing, it has to have a sort of a green lens to everything that we're doing. In summary then as well, we're talking once again, it's not an easy sort of light investment. On the grand scheme of things, $150,000 isn't a lot of money, but it is a lot of money for us to consider in light of a lot of other pressures that we have. So we're going to ask council to really to support the climate initiatives that we've got being proposed, and you will see there's $50,000 for 2021. And then what we're saying is that we're going to start the onboarding once budget is approved. If budget is approved and we're allowed the $50,000 being allocated, we're going to start immediately by becoming members of the organizations and start the onboarding of a consultant and start looking seriously at the onboarding of some staff, a staff resource to really move this forward. Finally, then, in terms of discussion, which is really why we're gathered here tonight, is really to have an opportunity for council to really be vocal, to really speak up and really make your feelings known in terms of, you know, and some things that we're looking is, you know, do you feel that it's really important for the municipality, and what action do you think we should be taking What is it about climate action that really, and climate change, that concerns you the most? What sort of direction, what sort of priorities do you think that the committee should have? And you know, are you personally experiencing anything from an impact from a climate change perspective? You know, do you notice something, for those of you who've been around for a longer time? You know, do you see things happening that are worrying you, and what, as a committee, should we know about so that we can focus in some of our priorities as well, and gear some of the work plan priorities into addressing some of those concerns? And really with that, it's opening the floor, and we're hoping that you're going to have lots of questions and we can have lots of dialogue and discussion, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Al. Madam Clerk, I'm going to open the floor up to council for questions, and in case I can't, if I miss somebody, please let me know. So I'm going to open the floor up to council. Council members have any questions or comments wanted made on the presentation? While they're thinking, Madam Clerk, I have two questions I would like to ask. The first one is, excuse my ignorance, but is there many of these consultants that do this particular kind of work available?
Yeah. Sure, I'll take it through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there are quite a few. There's some that specifically do nothing, but they're very well recognized as subject matter experts, and there are very qualified people out there. Quite a few of them, yes.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Carlton, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the things that we need to keep in kind of the back of our mind is that, well, like Al mentioned, the return on investment, we won't get that money back, but there will be cost savings to be had over the years that will come about because of the things we do to adapt to or mitigate climate change. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Al.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Part of what is intriguing, and is something that I did at a past life, was when we did a retrofit in any of our facilities, for example, what we did was we grabbed the previous 5 years of utility bills, and we averaged them out, and then we did our retrofit, and we said, okay, here's what the expected savings were going to be. And what we did with the budget the following year after doing that retrofit is we actually reduced that budget. And what we did was we put those budgeted savings into a reserve, which was then accumulating year after year to allow us then to fund other projects. So it in essence became a self-funded fund to help us with energy initiatives and building retrofits and things of that sort. So when we bring sort of the consultant on board, if it's council's direction to bring a consultant on board and bring some resources around this, that's one of the things that I'd be looking at, is in terms of trying to get a self-funded model that would really help us continue this and a continuous improvement process, a continuous sort of fund where year after year we can go grab some money and say, here's what we're going to do with it now, and here's what we're going to do, without actually going back to the taxpayer year after year and asking for more and more.
Thanks, Al. A comment from me before I open it back up to council is that we have two great councilors on this climate action committee. We have a great chair, Councilor Coburn, and we got some fantastic experts from the public. The question I have is that if and when we hire this consultant and the consultant starts to work with that committee, and I can see you spending quite a great deal of time on it, all this committee is going to do is research and all the other stuff you need to do with a consultant and bring a recommendation back to council for approval. Am I correct in saying that? Al or somebody?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. The committee is really a working committee, an advisory committee, so they will work with the resources. They'll really identify some of the best practice, make some recommendations, and as every committee, it goes back to council. Council is ultimately the deciding body here and makes the decisions on behalf of the municipality or the township. So absolutely, the consultant will be working with the committee members, really sort of getting direction, working together, and then any of those recommendations will be going to council for final endorsement.
Thank you, Al. I open the floor back up to council. Any questions from council? Councilor Barfoot, I cannot see you, so I'm not sure. Just speak up if you have a question.
I'm here. And this, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to I don't know who. Years ago, we had solar panels installed on 2 of our community centers. And I can't tell you what the cost savings was, but at the time it was the thing to do. I also want to refer, and Mr. Mayor, you sat on this committee too. It's interesting, the wind turbine issue. Georgian Bluffs has made it known that we are not a willing host. I guess I go back to some of the discussions that were held at the wind turbine meetings, how Ontario Hydro is actually producing so much hydro that we're selling it at a loss to, was it Quebec or to the States, Mr. Mayor? Or Councillor Coburn, help me on this. So, you know, you've got big corporations like Ontario Hydro that was doing this. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Good comments. I guess
I would like to know the committee's response on this wind turbine issue.
It's a big question, but maybe we could break it up a wee bit. Councillor Colburn, I'll let you speak first to, can you speak on the hydro, where it's going and so on?
Well, I certainly wouldn't call myself a hydro expert. I do believe I have heard that its excess is being shipped south of us to the States. But I think maybe more importantly, I think it's an important consideration, alternate forms of energy production. But I wonder if that's perhaps a little bit putting the cart before the horse. I think what we need to do is get the process and the structure in place. And as Mr. Anderson has indicated in the chat box, one of the most important things I think we need to do is consult with the public and ask them for their input and work with them to determine what our priorities are and move that agenda forward based on some input from important stakeholders, our agricultural community, our business owners, the general public, everybody. So those particulars that will be forthcoming in discussions, that will be down the road a little bit, I think.
I agree with that. Al, go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just to answer Councillor Barfoot's question in regards to the solar panels. I actually saw them in the last couple of weeks when I went to the facilities. My understanding is that we have actually leased out the space for a company who pays us a monthly rent, and they then generate the power and whatever the financials are in regards to that. So we didn't actually install them to reduce our footprint or our energy consumption. It was actually sort of a revenue generator. I believe it was done during the feed-in tariff program what the province had a few years ago. There was a bunch of third-party providers that started to get into the business and started to look for leased rooftops and things of that sort, and then they would just lease the space, and then they would sell the power back into the grid and make the difference. The first, there was about, I think, 5 or 6 phases in the feed-in tariff program that the province had, and each phase, the money that they were paying the providers got lower and lower because it was quite rich phase 1 as they were trying to encourage people to go to cleaner forms of energy. So just to answer the councillor's question, we still have the solar panels. They're still at the 2 facilities. We are getting some revenue in terms of rent, but they actually manage the power going into the grid and make the money from there.
Thank you, Al. Councillor Barfoot, did that answer your question?
Somewhat.
Okay, can you add any more to it yourself, or?
No, I think I'm dug the hole deep enough. No, it was just curious hearing all the discussion at the and there were some very intelligent people that sat on that wind turbine committee, and it was interesting hearing. And also, they took us on an educational bus tour. Deputy Mayor Carlton was on that, and I didn't know anything about wind turbines, but I don't know. It's just an interesting concept. Again, it depends on who's in power in the province, whether they're going to put more up or not. I don't know.
Thank you, Councilor Barfoot. Before we go to Al, I sat on that wind turbine committee for many, many years. I don't want us in our climate action plan to get confused over a topic like wind turbine versus climate action. We've got to be very careful. I agree with what Councilor Coburn is saying. That will come out as we go through the process. And it's just, we don't want to get ourselves all weighed down by that. Al, comment?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Ray. That is basically what I was going to say. I wouldn't get too hung up just yet. I think we need to define that roadmap and start looking at some initiatives. And I don't think we'll be getting towards alternative forms of energy anytime soon. But when we do, I think it'll be a lot of community engagement. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for input, and there's a lot of regulations around those alternative forms of energy. So I think, if I may, I like to use the term, low-hanging fruit, and it's, we're going to start off with the things that we can get. We're going to start getting some momentum and start moving down this path before we start going somewhere where it's going to be much more complicated and time-consuming. But as someone told me the other day, you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and I think that's what we're going to be doing here. And we'll start with sort of the low-hanging fruit first, and then move it from there.
Thank you, Al.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say one thing.
Go ahead.
If the question comes up, it's nice to know, it's nice to have an answer, because a lot of people thought that the wind turbines were the do-all and the end-all to saving energy. And there was just sort of a free-for-all. People, as you know, there were horror stories about what happened to some people. But if I've got a question, I'm not the only person out there that's going to have a question. So be prepared. Don't slough it off.
No, I agree. Good comment. Deputy Mayor, or Madam Clerk, I see your hand is up. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to note that member John Anderson of the Climate Action Committee had submitted a message to the chat indicating that should Councillor Coburn wish to discuss wind turbines further, she is welcome to contact member Anderson for further discussions.
Councillor Coburn?
I think you meant Councillor Barfoot, Madam Clerk, but that's quite all right. I'm happy to discuss wind turbines with John as well. I always learn something from Mr. Anderson.
Councillor Thompson, go ahead. I believe I've seen your hand up.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was just, I think same as Councillor Coburn. I was just correcting that it was Councillor Barfoot, not Councillor Deputy Mayor.
While you guys are thinking, I want to make a couple comments. I'm going to be very careful how I do it, I hope. First of all, I do believe in action, the Climate Action Committee. I agree 100%. It's a great thing we're doing. I'm glad to hear the CEO saying that he's reached out to other CEOs and other municipalities, and we're going to all work together to see what we come up with. I agree with that way of thinking 100%. We in Georgian Bluffs are one little dot in the world. We have to keep that in mind. We in Georgian Bluffs are going to try and do everything we possibly can in our municipality to help with climate action throughout our beautiful place we live in. I'm quite sure that the committee really knows that and has that there in the mind. There's plenty of older generations that don't go along with our way of thinking. But once we get this plan in place and can show them this is what we should be doing, we'll take care of that. But I just want the committee to keep in mind that we all have to work together. This is something completely new, per se, for Georgian Bluffs. and we have to go very cautiously, make sure we dot our T's or our I's and cross our T's all the way through as we go. And I think that's very important that we do that. And we're just totally amazing to have the experts that live in Georgian Bluffs to help us out with that. And once we hire a consultant, it's going to help it much more. I open the floor back up to council. If I can't say anything, please speak up. And Chair Colburn, I can't really see all your committee. I don't know if we're going to open the floor and ask them to make any comments or not. And I'm sorry, I can't really see them all. Madam Clerk, will you want me to go through you or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just note that should any member of the Climate Action Committee wish to make a comment, please just raise your physical and virtual hand and we will call upon you as such. I see the first member has indicated her wish to speak, being member Ann Schneider.
Go ahead, Ann.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Brittany. I just wanted to draw your attention, actually, Dwight, you were talking about the importance of kind of keeping community up to speed in terms of what we're doing. And John Anderson in the chat did talk about one of the really important roles the committee can do is that community education and engagement. Because we kind of come from the community, we have kind of community members behind us. So I think we can play a really active role in doing that.
I agree 100%. And that's why when I made the comment that we have some great experts in Georgian Bluffs, which is great that we can work with them. Madam Clerk, can I see any, I cannot see any other comments from the committee, and would the chair of the committee want to, oh, I see there's another hand up. I don't know who it is.
Mr. Mayor, that is member John Anderson. Mr. Anderson, if you'd like to go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Mr. Anderson, you are muted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and Mayor Drury. I wasn't going to actually bring this up because it's something that's recently happened, but given the mayor's last statement, I think it's really, really important that we all understand that we're taking a very courageous step here. We're in a community that is looking at a future that's much different than anything that we or our parents or grandparents have known, and it's intimidating, it's scary, and as some of you know, I'm involved with the Niagara Adapts program. These are 7 municipalities working with Brock University to develop climate action plans. And last week, the town of Lincoln passed a resolution such as we're presenting to council here, and it was passed unanimously. And this week, they've been getting letters from a climate denier group, and I'm now working with them down there to help to ease the concerns of councillors that this is a funded, directed group that's trying to undermine the decision that council made. And we may get hit with something like this too. And I just want you to know that your committee's here and we're here to support you. And we probably have answers to things like this if it comes down the pipe in the future, whether it's, you know, an agency like is interacting now with the town of Lincoln or local people. And it's just something I wanted to try and assure people that we're here to help.
Thank you, John. Great comments. And that's part of what I was trying to say, and you do it more eloquently when I could. But it's great that we have people like you on board to help us. And I see there's another hand up, Brittany, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is member Danuta Vello. Danuta, if you'd like to go ahead.
Danuta, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany and Mayor Dwight. I just wanted to reiterate that two things, that Georgian Bluffs is a dot, but also climate change is immeasurable. And so we're looking at a global, and in Georgian Bluffs, a microcosm of that global situation. And so everyone has a role, which leads me to the other point I want to make, and why it's important for me to hear people's concerns, because only by hearing the concern can we address the need for information and to understand what affects people the most. And in that regard, climate change is the responsibility of every individual person, as well as governments and municipalities and so on. We all carry a responsibility because it's not anything that can be imposed on anybody. And I wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your great comments. And I succeeded in what I wanted to do, was to make that statement to make sure everybody is thinking the same way, and I can see it's happening. And that's good. I have another hand up. Brittany, I don't know who it is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize in advance. Luke, I may or may not butcher this name. That is member Luke Zandvliet. Member Luke, go ahead.
Thank you, Brittany, and thanks, Mr. Mayor. Basically following up on your question and also the responses from John and Danuta. What we have also discussed in the group is that, of course, as part of Georgia Bluffs, agriculture is critical, and we really see that agriculture is part of the solution, and therefore also very much committed to work with the experts, with Alice and the NFU Gray, to really see how can agriculture, which is such a substantial part of the municipality, actually really play its role, and also recognizing how much of a role they're already playing. And I think that's a concern that many members may have, or many people in the municipality. So I just want to just put that on the table, that we see this very much as something that requires a holistic approach. Like Danuta said, everybody has their role, but we are quite committed to finding solutions and making sure that, like I said, agriculture is part of the solution. That's a critical part of the plan moving forward.
Thank you for your great comments, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. Does any other councilors? Councilor Coburn, maybe I'll turn it over to you to have a.
Thank you, Mayor Dwight. I would go to Bob Gray, I think, next. He has his hand up, and following that, our deputy mayor.
Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I commend council for looking at this issue. In my mind, climate change is a really big deal. It's kind of a slow moving thing, I think, but it's coming our way. It may affect more of our children and our grandchildren and their kids more than ourselves, but certainly things are changing in a big way. And I just think that we all have a responsibility to try to do the best we can to educate people and to try to change the way that we do things. And there's a lot of things that we can do to make things better, maybe not so much for ourselves, but for the future. That's where I think the First Nations people have it kind of right. You know, they look towards the future for the next 7 generations, and most of us are just looking towards the end of the month. You know what I mean? So it's a different way of looking at things, but I think it's an important way to look at things, so we can all do better, and we're certainly all dedicated, and we're here to help in any way that we can. So thank you for your consideration of this.
Thank you, Bob. Deputy Mayor Carlton, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, today or this morning was the Grey County Federation of Agriculture and Bruce County Federation of Agriculture Politicians Day in Elmwood, virtually this year. One of the speakers there was Peter Seconda. He's the farm policy analyst with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. And he was speaking about carbon tax and how it applies to agriculture and what they would like to do to help with climate change and that type of thing. And he might be a person for us to get in touch with and have him give that background and that perspective on agriculture and how it applies to climate change. Because he had some comments, and I'm not sure I captured them all properly, as to what the agricultural community could do to assist the municipalities with climate change. So that might be an avenue, somebody to have come forward and speak to us.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I see your chair is making some notes, and I guess your committee can go further from there. Al, any other comments?
No, for me, Mr. Mayor, I would just encourage members of council to speak up and really make your feelings known in terms of where you want this committee to go and some of the priorities you'd like them to focus on. You know, the intent today was to really provide council with that opportunity. And if something comes to mind at a later date, please feel free to either reach the chair or the clerk or myself, and we can certainly bring those concerns forward, or those questions, or those recommendations or observations that you'd like. And the goal is for us to all work together. And I couldn't agree more with the comments in terms of education and awareness. And I think it starts with council leading the way and really having a dedicated education and awareness program for all of our residents to understand how important it is for some of the things that we want to do, but how important it is for them as well in terms of some of the things that they can do.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to let the chair have one last comment. Councillor Colburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's generous of you, but I don't know that I have anything more to add. I think everyone has said it very well, and I will defer back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. I just want you and your committee to understand my comments in no way were meant to be negative. My comments were made just to get us all thinking. My phone does ring quite a bit, and I can see as we move forward, Al's phone will ring hopefully more than mine. But I would just like to make sure that you understand where I may come from. I agree 100% what you're doing, and we're just so lucky to have such experts working on your committee with you, and we get the consultants so we can move this thing forward. And let's face it, we're working not just in George and Bless, we're working in Grady and Bruce counties, the whole region together to see how we can put a proper plan in place to move forward. That's my only comment. If we no other comments on this particular item, I'll move on to the agenda. So I'll move down to our staff report. I have a recommendation here that memo report LEG 2020-27 regarding ongoing township climate action initiatives be received for information. Madam Clerk, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, I'd be happy to if you could please just ask for a mover and a seconder first.
Sorry, it's my first meeting. I've never done it before. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Thompson. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just provide a brief overview of what the report contains. A lot of it we've discussed, especially the shallow lake solar panels that have been installed on the roof line. I wanted to make one note of an addition that has been made since the Climate Action Committee saw this report last year. Our Director of Operations, who is currently on the line, has indicated that the township will be replacing windows in all of its facility this year. Specifically, the single-paned windows will be replaced with double-paned windows. And further, the energy conservation and demand management plan will be updated in 2021. So if there's any questions, I will field them, likely in consultation with our Director of Operations.
Thank you, Brittany. That's great news. Does anyone have any council member have any questions? See none. It's good information. I'm going to ask for all those in favor of the recommendation before us, the motion. All in favor, show of hands. Councillor Barfoot, yeah, okay, it's carried. Thank you. So moving on to our agenda, we're down to our next recommendation. That report CAO 2021-01 regarding an introduction to climate action planning initiative be received for information, and the council consider allocating $150,000 over the next 3 years with $50,000 in 2021 towards climate action planning initiatives at their annual budget meeting on March 30th, 2021. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? What this, what this motion is doing is just moving it forward to our budget process so we can have our discussion there, I believe. Is that not correct, Madam Clerk?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. If there's no discussion on the motion before us, all in favor of the motion before us? The motion is carried. Madam Clerk, did we receive any questions from the public?
We did not.
Thank you. We're down to our confirming bylaw. I have a bylaw 2021-22 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on March 24th, 2021 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and sealed the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? All in favor? The motion is carried. Council will again meet at our regular scheduled meeting April 7th, 2021 at 5 o'clock. As a reminder to both council and the public, council has scheduled 2021 budget discussions on March 30th, 2021 at 1 p.m. All are welcome to join virtually upon registering with the township clerk. Before I ask for a motion of adjournment, I want to, Councillor Coburn, thank you and your committee for all the work you're going to be doing in the future and all the hard work you will be doing. And thank you very much to every one of them. So I'll ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Barfoot. If we have no other business here tonight, all those in favor of adjournment, I believe is carried. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night. Thank you very much.